The purpose of this webinar and this panel was really motivated by the fact that software companies are going through this huge moment of uncertainty with budget cuts and layoffs being announced daily. And at Cloudthread, we talk to companies that are starting out on a cloud cost management journey, and they're a bit overwhelmed at how to get started, both in terms of quick actions they can take and in terms of how, kind of from a long-term strategy perspective, they should be thinking about things. And we figured that what better way for people to get started than to hear from veteran cloud cost management practitioners. So thank you so much to the panelists who've joined. They're going to give intros in a second and give context on their work in the space. The topic of today's chat is how to reclaim cash from your cloud bill. And we're going to talk about, both quick wins and thinking about longer term strategy. So a couple of housekeeping items. This is a Zoom webinar, and so that means that the attendees, you won't be able to turn on your video or speak, but we encourage you to ask questions at any point in time. I got some people ahead of the event saying that they would ask really challenging questions. So very much encouraged. Chime in with whatever questions you have. We have audience members who are both complete new members to FinOps, newcomers to FinOps, and veterans. So we'll try to ensure the conversation has interesting takeaways for everyone, but don't hesitate to chime in with questions of any sort. And we've gotten various requests that the session be recorded for those that couldn't join. So we'll be recording and then sharing this video later this week.
Awesome. And I suggest we start with a round of short intros. And, just like a quick overview how you connect it to cloud cost management space. And I will start with myself. I've been doing cloud cost management for my entire career. And before Cloudthread, I've been leading cloud cost management effort at Electronic Arts. And after that, I've been building in-house cloud cost management solution at Lyft. Wim, maybe you go next.
Yeah, sure. So I worked my full career, it's not that long, 9 years, in all kinds of roles related to FinOps. So in financial roles, management roles, but also IT roles. I moved 3 years, I was responsible for 3 years for a cloud hosting department for a big Dutch telco, where we all had our own data centers and mainly CapEx driven. I have a passion for optimization, and therefore after the 3 years I used to do that role, I really wanted to try out different thing. The cloud was a big new thing, and it was also more OpEx driven. So that gave me the opportunity to do whatever I really like to do. Yeah, that's it, I guess.
Thank you. Konstantin?
Yes, hello. My name is Konstantin. I'm currently working as a software engineer at Lyft, and I work on the machine learning infrastructure team there. But my connection to the space is actually when I started at Lyft as a new college grad around 4 years ago. I was the second engineer on the capacity and efficiency team there. And we were essentially kind of building a system for managing our cloud infrastructure costs after the company was already scaled up to like thousands of engineers and sort of like 8 figures of monthly cloud cost spending. So I spent about a year working in that space.
Awesome. Vitaly?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Vitaly. So I'm leading FinOps at Align Technology. Align Technology is a company that stands behind the Invisalign. That's our main product. Maybe you're familiar with that. And I've been in the FinOps space for a while. I built this function from scratch here at Align, and I was observing basically the evolution of this function at the company and in industry in general. And before Align, I was working at Accenture, focusing on IT infrastructure, strategy, and cloud migration. And I even saw a real mainframe with my own eyes.
Nice. Maciej?
Sure. My name is Maciej. I'm leading the cloud cost management practice here at Sumo Logic. And I joined Cloud Cost Management purely by chance. So when I joined Sumo, they asked me, "Hey, this is like this new role. We want to invest more into looking more closely into our cost." And well, here I am.
And after intros, I suggest kind of like a quick moment of nostalgia, and you know, each of us kind of like bringing up some most memorable stories from the cloud cost management journey that we've been through. And yeah, I can start with myself, and that is like very kind of like early story of like my career when I just started at Electronic Arts. And I was just like getting into the weeds with cloud cost management, a lot of game teams there, everybody's doing something. And we introduced the first version, like very basic spreadsheet driven kind of you know, cloud cost management, basically tracking like resources and what was going on. And after about like 2 weeks that was you know, like working, we uncovered like this huge load test cluster that was completely forgotten by one of the game teams. And it was literally, it was not something small. It was like 800 instances or something like that that were up, you know, like for, you know, a couple of days before we saw it, you know, and if not our system, it would have been like a huge damage. And that's when I realized that, wow, okay, you know, like what we are doing is very important. So, yeah.
So yeah, I had many times the same experience as you did, Ilya. Yeah, maybe for Randstad. So I work for Randstad, and we have let's say a federated model with many own operating companies, which are P&L responsible. For us, a really big gain was, and it sounds maybe a little bit too simple, was just consolidating the accounts. So making it one payer account, for instance, with AWS, and getting the right amounts of, in this case, EDP in to get bills going down, but also to reach skill advantages, which in my opinion is always the first start you need to consider. So I would recommend all people here, look at your accounts, try to link everything, and move from there.
Yeah, for sure. Vitaly?
Yeah, it's really hard to pick one, so I'll go with two real quick. So it's basically kind of these like small stories where you understanding that this is super important, and that even though the DevOps or like software engineers are really good, they're without like proper guidance, they are not really good at the cloud cost management because they didn't have this basically kind of a goal beforehand. So my story is first is when I joined Align, I was just started looking at the data, and I just noticed that all the RDS instances that we have are configured almost the same everywhere, from development environment to production, and everywhere everything is set up for like high availability, which is basically multiplies the RDS cost by 2. So I started to ask questions like, why do you need this HA setup in development environments? Do you test failover like every day, or like what's the point here? And everyone was like, hey, we just configure it like that. Nobody cares. Yeah, this was like eye-opening moment for me. I realized that like, hey, there's a lot of things we can do with like with this particular company and this particular field.
That's a great story.
Yeah. Konstantin?
Yeah, I have kind of a high-level story and then a low-level story. I think the high-level story is about Lyft's like journey with cloud cost management in general, which to me was just like awe-inspiring and amazing. Like when I joined Lyft, our costs were essentially like swelling exponentially, and there were like months when we had these war rooms, and like all the like VPs and directors would like come into a room and like look at charts that were just going like exponentially up and to the right. And this was as Lyft was like getting ready to IPO. We were spending like literally 8 figures per month, and then growing very quickly on AWS. And it seemed like there were, you know, hundreds of teams involved, like you know, hundreds of different systems that were contributing to this. But I was just blown away how over the course of like 12 to 18 months, I got to interact with basically like all of those teams, and people actually mobilized. And at the end, I mean, we had like individual organizations that did like 10, $20 million of like reduction in their infrastructure spending per year. And then in aggregate, I think that like Lyft's cloud spending now is probably half of where it was at peak. And that's like after years of like, you know, accumulating additional data and like more development. So I think the high level story at Lyft is amazing. At a low level, I have one particular story, which was like at the end of my first year, I had been working on kind of like tooling for monitoring our Kubernetes infrastructure and kind of like doing multi-tenant platform attribution. But I was looking to get promoted as a new grad software engineer. And so I went to my manager at the time, Patrick, and I'm like, you know, I want to get some more wins to like essentially book on my performance review. And he suggested an opportunity to iterate over EC2 instances, like using AWS APIs to write a script to iterate over our instances, and just look for ones that were not attached to an ASG. So like detached instances, I'm sure that folks who have been practicing this have like encountered this like many different tools. But through that, we basically found instances that we were pretty confident were not being used anywhere throughout Lyft's infrastructure. And then we were able to terminate those and essentially book, again, like kind of a $1 to $2 million per year win based on that.
Yeah, that's a huge scale. Yeah, I also remember those times. Very, very exciting. Maciej?
Yeah, it's funny because like when you're saying this, I can totally relate to at least half of those stories you're saying, and Vidley is especially yours with provisioning everything on the developer accounts with the same availability as for production. Yes, I also seen that once. But like like the story I like to tell most is it's because it pulls everything into like basically it is a story of when I first joined Sumo like 5 years ago, and it was probably one of my first projects. Basically. One of our, not to get into detail, but one of our systems for Blue-green deployments was using 2 DynamoDB tables. And at one time, only one of them was used, but we provisioned 2 of them at all times. So basically, the code to fix that was to basically deprovision one of them during the switch from blue to green and vice versa. And this was 10 lines of code. And it saved from our monthly bill more than my monthly salary. So, and the fun fact is that this code is still in production. So technically, I'm still being paid by those 10 lines of code I wrote back in 2017.
Easy justification for your role.
Yeah.
And any potential salary increase. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you for sharing the stories. Constantine, I mean, it's really interesting that you kind of started off your software engineering career in like building a cloud cost management system at Lyft. And oftentimes people are starting their software engineering career and they aren't thinking about costs at all. I'd love to hear if like now you're working in a different function in Lyft, how has that experience of being entrenched in cloud costs at Lyft affected how you think about your role and about cloud costs, especially you said you're on the ML team, so notoriously big driver of analytics spend and compute spend in the cloud. How has it affected the way you think about cloud costs in your software engineering work? You're on mute.
I muted myself. So it's a good question. Overall, actually, before I joined Lyft as a new grad, I did a bunch of internships. So I interned at Facebook twice, and Stripe and Amazon. And so at those places, I kind of generally worked on kind of like backend engineering and machine learning infrastructure. But then the reason I joined the cloud cost team at Lyft was actually when I was talking to the different teams at the company and choosing where to go. it seemed like a good opportunity to work on a greenfield project. So a lot of the other teams were actually like quite mature and like scaled out, whereas like the capacity team was basically like starting out and like building brand new systems. And I thought that would be a good opportunity, basically, of like the options that were presented to me. And then in terms of how that experience has sort of translated over to being on the ML infra team and like working on ML, I think it's pretty interesting. I've definitely been like called upon to work on some like optimization projects on ML, like right sizing our like training deployments, right sizing our serving deployments. And those have always been kind of naturally easier for me because I know like how the tools are, I know how to like justify the impact there. That's one part. The other is I think working on like the high level capacity management, like cost team is actually pretty different from working on the like platform specific stuff. I think it's like the same goal, but on the platform specific stuff, I think you get much more in the weeds and you think about like the specific like user experience on like the ML platform. You think about how to present like very granular costs. Whereas like on the company-wide like capacity team, I think we were thinking more about like direction and like process to influence like org leadership versus like on the platform, like kind of like low level team, we're thinking more about how to influence like specific users and get them to like shut off their notebook or like make their training job less costly. So I think the tools that we use are a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. Well, great. So in line with kind of the topic of today's chat of reclaiming cash from your cloud bill, I'd love to hear, you know, from each of you. Someone approaches you, they ping you, they have 6+ figure yearly cloud spend. They've just been given the job of like cloud bill owner. They've never touched the billing console or seen a cur file, and you have a couple sentences of advice. What would you kind of tell that person? And maybe we can start with you, Maciej, and go in the opposite order.
Sure. So my first advice would be like the typical problem I've seen with the cloud cost management is like engineers, and this especially like this mostly applies to engineers, but not only. Engineers love to basically run to the work to basically achieve some cost savings. Like basically they see some opportunity, they just grab it, right? And very often this works. But my advice would be to basically stop for a second and then basically analyze the opportunities that lie ahead without like before moving to action. So I've seen many teams working on some cost optimization, like projects that were meant to deliver cost savings, only to see that at the end of the day, basically they didn't achieve as much as they expected, basically because there was not enough research done previously.
Absolutely. Vitaly, what do you think? Your words of initial advice.
So basically, the first thing I would do is bring all the stakeholders together and give them this idea that like this is what we see like in industry, that if you never worked with the cloud billing before, like if you never did any cost optimization, so 30% out of your cloud bill is your like most probably your potential kind of a cost reduction that you can achieve. So I would bring everyone together and ask like, hey, this is our cloud bill. This is the 30%. Like, are we interested in this, making this savings or not? Because like there are different situations. There are situations where we have a lot of money. The company could have a lot of money and they're focusing on the product and the money is not a problem. So like if the stakeholders will say, hey, the cost savings will require some additional resources, we don't have it right now, we're focusing on the product. Okay, this is our decision. But if we're like, if the stakeholders, the outcome of this meeting would be like, hey, yeah, 30% looks really interesting for us. Let's do that. The next step would be I would allocate a dedicated resource to basically focusing on this particular problem, because otherwise it will not work.
And can you elaborate on kind of, when you say everyone, can you elaborate on bucketing those stakeholders that you think of? Because sometimes people struggle to think about, you know, who are the stakeholders that I need to pull in to feel like we can confidently move forward? Yeah,
that's all actually a good question. So there are also kind of different options for that. Like if there is like a centralized team that is managing this cloud budget, it's like a common bucket for everyone. They're just like spinning down the resources, and one team is responsible for that. I would basically bring them first. But if it is somehow allocated, I would bring the product owners so that they can see that like these potential 30% of savings could go to their budget directly, so they can, instead of spending the money on the cloud, they can hire more resources for their product team. So it depends.
Always depends. Constantine, your advice to someone starting out, and you have a couple words of wisdom.
Few words of wisdom. So I think I would kind of like plus one what Vitaly was saying, where it kind of depends on the scale of your cloud spend, and then like whether that makes sense relative to like your company's funding and your goals. I think that as far as I know, Lyft didn't really look at cloud spending almost at all until maybe like 2017, when it already had hundreds of engineers. But that's kind of a property of how Lyft was as a company. I think having gone through this journey and having kind of like looked at what the team's done like in the past like 2 or 3 years, even like since after I've left, I think that my advice would be that there have been many great tools that have come online since. So like we actually spent a lot of time building like ROI optimization. We built kind of like very custom dashboards for monitoring spending using like Superset, using like our own internal open source software. And I think that I would now try to lean as much as possible on like products and like open source tooling, because kind of in the steady state, even for a big company, I think it becomes very expensive to maintain all of this like custom internal stuff. Like I think that actually like after we built some like custom dashboards, we ended up switching to something much simpler. Like we switched to mode reports because it was very difficult to iterate on these like custom components. And then the same is true for like reserved instances. I think there was a lot of investment in that. But with savings plans, for instance, I'm not an expert on like the details of like whether savings plans completely obviate RIs, but it seems like a lot of like the benefit there and a lot of the impact was actually diminished. And that's for a company that was already like operating at a huge scale. So my advice would be like, look at tools and vendors as much as possible, I think.
You already half answered Jessica's question, which we'll circle back to.
I'm sure other folks have much more insights.
Wim, maybe your kind of initial words of wisdom to a newcomer.
Yes, sure. So before we start with the wisdom, I think, and if we look at Randstad, savings plans are in nearly all situations the preferred plans, discount plan. So basically what we did, we moved everything from RIs to savings plans. First, we moved them to a combination of compute plans with EC2 plans, because compute plans are more broad available and EC2 plans are more regional specific. And now we're looking to make, again, only compute plans, but then with a mix of 1 year and 3 years plans to avoid risks. But anyway, so my word of wisdom is also aligned with the previous speakers. So I think it's very good to start with the stakeholders and to ask them the question, hey, what do we want to see? So for me, it's all about visibility. You cannot optimize if you don't know how the steer is looking. Yeah. So first, I would start with visibility. You build some trust with stakeholders so they can see every week or every day or every month, whatever your reporting structure is, they can see the same buckets of cost. And of course, in the back end, what you should do, in my opinion, is start tagging. Tagging is very important.
Yeah.
And then the next step is make sure that you bring in those reports, but you also bring in structurally similar optimization initiatives. And when you finish the optimization initiatives, for instance, moving to a new processor type, what we did, or moving to a Lambda or whatever, then you can make sure that you change the optimization initiatives for new ones. And from there, you can start optimizing all the time.
Yeah, the tagging advice is a really great one, and yeah, you can only do so much if you're flying blind, and you know, we work on kind of finding ways to tag an infrastructure that has scaled up untagged, and looking at other resource metadata to create tags, or ways to kind of work backwards. But if anyone's starting out, that's also my first advice. Amazing.
Yeah. Awesome, folks. Thank you so much. Really great pieces of advice. And I'm pretty sure that our audience is already getting tons of value from this discussion. And I just wanted to do a bit of like step back from like very specific advice and focus on like more like of a strategy topic. During like this conversation, we talked about like involving various stakeholders. And also, like Konstantin mentioned, you know, like engineers and engineering teams. And we all know that this is a very big part of like cloud cost management journey, how to engage engineers into this whole game, right? Because if they're like disengaged, we all know that probably, you know, nothing gonna like move. And you know, CloudThread is also like really focused on like solving like this problem. So that's like very big topic. And I wanted to address like the next question to you, Konstantin. Basically, as someone who's been like on both sides, right? You know, first at Lyft, you've been like building in-house cloud cost management solution. And now you're part of, you know, machine learning team, basically on like that engineering side. Like, what do you think is a good strategy of engaging engineer into cloud cost management? Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, I'm happy to blabber a bit about this. I think that the high level is that people respond to various kind of like nudges and incentives. So like for engineers in particular, I think it's really helpful if like you're able to tie back some usage to a person and then put that in front of their face. So like on like the machine learning platform team, I've seen like multiple examples where like when you spin up a training job, that gets attributed back to like your specific username at the company. And then we can tell when like someone has spent like $25,000 training models in the past week. And then we're able to kind of like show them, prove it to them, and then they can like take action based on that. And so I think that's kind of like the nudge that helps for individuals. But and I think for orgs, it's a little bit different. I actually think that the people who are incentivized most to like reduce spending or like make architectural initiatives are not necessarily the engineers, especially in kind of like individual situations. Like I was talking about my case where like I wanted my performance review to look good, so I went off and tried to find some like quick cost wins. But I think that in general, the people who kind of like are incentivized to really care about P&L and are incentivized to care about business results tend to be people that are actually a little bit higher level. So one of the things that I think we kind of converged on at Lyft is that if we have targets that we want to set for an org, like the marketplace org or like the mapping org, we generally want to work with like the director of that org who like really cares about P&L and is able to kind of like, you know the people on the team, incentivize the people on the team. And they actually, yeah, they have more agency there. And so, yeah, I think having fewer people that you work with that are kind of like more of an executive function is, I think, really important for like high level results, especially like things that are spanning multiple months or like quarters.
that first point is a really good one. And it's kind of the, stepping stone to kind of scoreboarding and benchmarking. But could you talk about how you do that in a way that is like encouraging? Because people talk about carrot and stick, and you don't want like the stick and, wall of shame type result, but more of an encouraging kind of patting each other on the back for wins result. So can you talk about how you would achieve your first goal in a like more cost win or feel good culture?
Yeah. I think to some extent it comes down to like the company specific culture.
Yeah.
Like in like one of my experiences recently was I had a friend who like her name came up on like our top ML platform users for like the previous week. And the thing that it was saying was like, she spent maybe like $25,000 to $50,000 trading a model in the previous week. And I think that, for whatever reason, like the culture at Lyft is such that it's not necessarily like a shameful thing, or like people don't necessarily look at it as a negative.
Yeah.
But it was still a good opportunity to like reach out to her and then ask her what's going on. And then she was able to kind of like optimize her training code and reduce the spending in future weeks. So I think that the high level thing I would say there is that it shouldn't be like a shameful thing to be like called out for over provisioning a job, or like for spending too much money on some part of your infrastructure. But I think it should sort of be celebrated if you're able to course correct pretty quickly. And I think we should like support people who are able to like have that kind of impact.
Yeah. Amazing. Wow, this is so much to talk about, so little time is how I'm feeling right now. Maybe we can just address a question that just came in. Thank you, Jessica, on how you gain buy-in from your engineering leadership on cloud cost management initiatives. Interesting. Maybe Vitaly, you can comment on this, because you were talking about kind of getting everyone, the right stakeholders aligned. So what would your answer be?
So this is, I think it, again, it also depends on the person, because like when we are talking about the engineering teams, engineers love to solve problems, and this is a key here. So if you're addressing this kind of a cost problem as something interesting in engineering wise, so that they can basically, it's just like another efficiency metric. They basically should incorporate this cost metric to their kind of a development strategy, so that they can be more efficient in the cost kind of a field. And some teams are really kind of get encouraged by only that. You're just saying like, hey, you can not only deliver like the business value, but you can also reduce costs. And this is like, these are the tools that you can measure yourself. And like only by that, some of the teams are getting the buy-in. There are also kind of a different situation where engineering team is not caring about cost. So this is something in the FinOps field, we're calling it like a bad citizens. So yeah, for that particular case, I would suggest just to escalate it and talk to the leadership, because like it's a no-brainer for everyone. Everyone understands dollars. It's like really hard to justify some optimization if we are talking about latency, or if we are talking about like any engineering metric to the upper management or executive team. But when we are talking about dollars, everyone like this is crystal clear for everyone. So yeah, I would suggest
metric everyone can understand.
I would suggest start with like some kind of a soft power or advice where you can try to basically make this interesting. And if it's not working and you're seeing it as a big problem in your like overall budget, then yeah, definitely escalate it to the management team.
Yeah, great advice. Maciej, you published a great article on unit economics and discussing how you think about it at Sumo Logic, and I'd love I'm sure a lot of attendees would love to hear what your general advice would be on how unit metrics fit into an ongoing cloud cost management process.
Sure. So first of all, like unit metrics is not a one size fits all solution, and probably it's not for somebody who's starting their cloud cost optimization journey. But like at some stage, I believe like unit economics can be a very helpful way to express and better understand what's going on under the hood of our basically our bill. So basically, the logic behind unit economics is to express to show to engineering to other departments not only the absolute costs in, for instance, dollars, but also show the cost efficiency relative to cost relative to some units of measurement. So just to give you the example, in Sumo Logic, we like one of our products is one of our product is basically log management solution, and we measure the amount of in that product we measure the amount of data we get from our customers. So basically, the logical way to express the cost efficiency of that fragment of infrastructure is basically to calculate the cost per gigabyte of ingested logs, right? And that helps us to better understand not only how our bill is growing, but how effective is our system. So for instance, whether our workloads start to increase, does our system perform better in terms of cost efficiency, or does it degrade? And for instance, when it starts degrading, it helps to better understand what is going, which component might be responsible for this, and digging deeper into this basically gives better and more understanding on what is going on in our system.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of both a cost efficiency, but also highlights where to look sometimes if something fluctuates out of norm. Go ahead, Ilya. I was just gonna bring the question to light. We just got a question on the kind of serverless AWS services and not being able to resort to savings plans. And Wim, I think this is somewhat related to what you were saying about the compute savings plans being more flexible. So maybe you could answer on kind of the compute savings plans as applied to serverless services, and then maybe more generally advice on cost visibility for serverless.
Yeah, so to be honest, our infrastructure is still a lot of servers, but what we do see, we're using more and more, let's say, Lambda functions or Fargate. So compute plans apply to EC2 compute, Fargate, and Lambda. So if you're using those components, you can use a tool, or you can make a tool where you can just see how effective the reservations are. So you can just measure, hey, do I have waste, or is there no waste? I always say a little bit of waste is not too bad, but I encourage you to make a strategy around. That's the starting point of everything. Start with visibility and make a strategy around. So that about that point. So more looking also on the serverless part. So today we're also looking into, hey, what can we do, for instance, making the migration to more serverless workloads, because at Randstad we have many applications. So deduplication of applications is a big topic for us, but how can you make it more serverless? Then I would say start with your architects, as I think those should be also on that same table. Start with asking them, hey, how can we make this working? What is your future strategy? How can we make this work across clouds, etc., etc.
Amazing.
Awesome. We're nearing the end of our discussion, and as part of this strategic kind of view, Vitaly, I wanted to ask you, you're part of this big organization. Align, and there are many engineering teams, many applications. How do you figure out the cloud cost management strategy that fits to all those like various use cases, and how do you make sure that nothing is kind of like left aside?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but I'll try to answer that. I would start with the key here is to establish the ground rules with the engineering teams, because like the worst thing that you can do as a FinOps practitioner is to cut someone budgets without kind of a proper reasoning or provide unclear guidance like, hey, just don't spend too much. This is something I would not recommend to do. To make the whole FinOps thing work, I would say that essential is to basically like make the cloud cost auditable, whether it's reports through budgeting, and to make sure that this data is streamlined to the right person, because if the team is receiving the data that is irrelevant, they are just starting to they're not starting to use it. They're just like, that's just a noise source for them. Yeah, this data could be like different depending on the stage where you're at. Like you can start with the like reporting, then anomaly detection, potential optimization that is tied directly to your piece of cloud infrastructure, so that to make this data as much actionable as possible. And then you can like, you're moving towards the unit metrics, which is also kind of an essential metric, like in a more developed stages. The other thing is basically to educate teams on how the cloud billing is working, how the pricing model is working for different services. Yeah, just to prioritize this work, you normally start with the most critical teams, so that the impact of that is more kind of a essential for the company. Yeah, in parallel, what I was talking about previously is that you definitely need to communicate with the executive team, because nobody wants to be on this kind of a shame wall that someone's team is like spending a lot or like having a lot of optimization opportunities and not acting on them. And yeah, as I like mentioned, everyone understands dollars. So like when you're saying like, hey, this is the opportunity that we're seeing, you can basically save that amount of money. When you're communicating to executive team, they're basically, well, at least they're bringing it to the table with their engineering teams to basically start this discussion like, hey, should we invest in like optimizing it first, or we should invest in like delivering this feature first, and optimization is some like, we'll get back to it in like a couple months or whatever.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah, to summarize, I would say it's just like making sure you're not like acting too aggressively and cutting someone's budget and like trying to become a bottleneck or like a gatekeeper.
Yeah,
it will not work.
Absolutely. Wim, kind of a question that I know that you work with multiple cloud providers at Randstad, and the multi-cloud is kind of a topic that pops up in cloud cost management communities a lot. And I'd wonder kind of what your comment on multi-cloud specific cost challenges that people should be aware of if they're managing multiple cloud providers and approaching cloud cost management.
Yeah, very tough question. So first of all, every cloud is more or less the same, in my opinion. So the services, they have a different name, but they do the same things. Of course, you have specific clouds. For instance, I think, in my opinion, the Google Cloud is very good for data workloads, especially BigQuery. So you have specific clouds where you want to place your workloads on. So workload placement strategy is very important. And again, I would suggest align that with the architects. On the other side, so one of the biggest challenges for us is at the moment reporting. Because I heard just dollars in our company, half of our company also responds to dollar amounts, but the other half responds to euro amounts. So there you get, let's say, FX dollar euro exchange rate differences. So that can be on low level also an issue, especially if you have a headquarter in one of those areas, then you need to decide in which valuta do I report, but also how do we report, for instance, based on compute on top of both clouds. I think that's crucial. On the other hand, what also comes in play is, and I started with this in the first topic we discussed in the intros, is the contractual thing. Because from a strategy point of view, it can be that you want to place some stuff in one of the clouds and you just want to optimize it as optimization team. But from a contractual point of view, you need to manage the commitments.
Right.
So managing commitments across clouds can lead to very interesting discussions. So just as an example, if you have in one of the contracts with one of the cloud service providers a market-based commitment in, and you don't have that commitment as part of the other contract, then you might want to shift the things. So looking at it more holistically, for us, that means reporting, optimization stuff, we think it's all roughly the same. Yeah, of course, you need to bundle different types of things. In AWS, you use accounts. In Google, you use projects. You need to bundle that. But if your tagging policy is well enough defined, that's not a problem. But at the end of the day, it's just managing and just combining the stuff, which is most important.
Awesome.
Okay, guys. Thank you so much for all your insights. We started this meeting with a very specific reclaim cache advice. Then we zoomed out and had an amazing discussion on more strategic topics. Also answered some questions from the audience. I'm pretty sure everybody got a lot of value from it. And to wrap up our today's panel talk, I want to ask your opinion on whether cloud cost management is central for organizations that do a lot in cloud during the times of economic downturn. It can be very short yes or no, or you can elaborate a bit more. But yeah, what's your opinion? Wim, let's start with you.
Oh, sorry, I need to unmute myself. So I think the cloud just follows the generic economic circumstances. So when we grow, there's less pressure on cost, although I think that's the time you need to look at cost. And when there's an economic decline, of course, everyone is directly looking at cost. And also some companies, for instance, Randstad also, they provide to stakeholders or to shareholders and what they call recovery ratio, which means nothing more than that if you decline X% in revenue, you should also decline your cost footprint. So it's for us, it's a logic consequence of that principle.
Makes sense. Maciej, what do you think?
Yeah, my answer would be simple yes. It's definitely something that especially in challenging times needs to be taken a look at.
Awesome. Konstantin?
Short answer is yes, and the slightly longer answer is that it appears that the current market values profitability more than growth. And so now more than before, it's probably important to drive down costs and manage them effectively.
Definitely. What do you think, Vitaly?
Well, definitely it's a yes. But again, I think as a company, the first step would be just to think of the project portfolio on what are the new priorities in these new circumstances. And when you basically define on the new priorities, then for each priority, the cloud cost is kind of essential. If there is an opportunity to decrease without affecting any kind of a business outcome, then yeah, definitely this is something that the company should consider to do.
Yeah, we definitely agree with you guys. So I think it's yes, but we should pay attention to business value, right? That's what should come first.
Amazing. We went over time and we still didn't get to cover everything we wanted to cover, but sensitive to everyone's time, and some attendees have already had to drop off. But thank you both. Thank you all so much for joining and kind of sharing your insights and firsthand stories. Some of these firsthand stories are even ones that I hadn't heard from you yet, and the firsthand experience and firsthand stories are the most compelling in terms of both the wins that you can have and also in terms of understanding prioritization when approaching cloud cost management. So thank you so much for joining to the panelists and to all the attendees. If someone was asking us, this will be recorded. It will be recorded and we'll share it later this week. And yeah, everyone have an amazing day and or evening, whichever time zone you're in.
Okay. Thank you, Wim. Thanks, Konstantin. Thanks
Thank you.
for watching.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for hosting.